Hi, and welcome to The Art of Connection. I am your host, Baya Voce, and if you're here, it's because you want to have better relationships in your life, right? Whether it's with yourself or with your partner, because listen, deep down inside, you know that the better your relationships are, right? The more happy, the more successful, and the more fulfilled you are in the long run. So today, I am so excited because we're talking about manipulation in relationships. Because while it might seem a little taboo to talk about, it's amazing how common it is. I have brought on an incredible expert to give us some insight into the signs of manipulation, what to do if you're in a relationship where manipulation is being used, and how to heal from these kinds of relationships. Our guest is Julie de Azevedo Hanks. She is a PhD and a licensed clinical social worker. She's a psychotherapist specializing in women's emotional health and relationships. Dr. Hanks is the founder and director of Wasatch Family Therapy, author of The Burnout Cure and The Assertiveness Guide for Women. She's a blogger, a local and national media contributor, an online mental health influencer, a coach, a consultant, and she's even an award-winning performing songwriter. For more resources and information, you can visit drjuliehanks.com, wasatchfamilytherapy.com, or connect with her at Dr. Julie Hanks on social media. And I'll make sure to link all of her information for you below the video. Okay, so welcome, Julie.
Thank you.
I am so happy to have you here.
Thanks, it's nice to be here.
Okay, so I want to start out, manipulation is so broad, right? Because it can happen with personality disorders, right? Narcissism, sociopathy. Then there's pathological lying, there's gaslighting. Like, there are so many arenas when it comes to manipulation. I almost don't even know where to start because it's so broad. But when I think, so I was at one point in a relationship where there was a lot of lying and manipulation. And I found myself as a confident, secure, wise, independent woman feeling totally confused, feeling like I was crazy. And so this can happen to anybody.
Right, it's not a certain personality that just attracts those kind of relationships. I mean, if you're in a relationship with someone who has a personality disorder or other mental illness, or who is just, you know, not a nice person, it can really impact your soul, your spirit, your emotional life, and how you see yourself. You start seeing yourself as worthless and, you know, not good enough. And you're like, who is this person? I don't recognize myself.
Yeah, well, because it seems like it does something to the brain, right? Like simple wear and tear, just like our habits, right? Just like we have our habits, that it's the little things that we do that in the end like really create our habits. It seems like manipulation happens as something that's probably not obvious.
Subtle.
And over a long period of time. So it does wear on your psychology.
Yeah, definitely. And then it becomes normal, right? You kind of boil the frog a little bit at a time, right?
Yeah.
So there are some signs, you know, early on in relationships, but we're not trained to see the signs. And then it often will escalate from there once you get in a committed relationship.
Okay, so what are the signs? Because it seems like you would start out in a relationship and the tactics to get you into a relationship, right, are probably like sweet and kind and doting, and then once you're in the relationship, that's when things, so can you kind of speak to like the beginning phase?
Yeah, if someone seems too good to be true, if you can't find any flaws, that's a warning sign.
Really?
Yeah. Everyone has flaws, everyone has annoying things about them, and so if this person is just everything, they're probably not being genuine. You don't know them well enough.
Okay, and is there, I mean, so I've done a little bit of research on gaslighting, and can you talk to what gaslighting is?
Yes, it's a form of manipulation in a relationship where the perpetrator gets the victim to question their view of reality, their own sanity. I'm crazy. So they might say something like, I've never hit you, when last night they just, you know, had a fight. And it's like you go, well, wait, I must be crazy because I don't have the same memory. We're talking about different things. What's going on?
So what's interesting that I have realized about gaslighting, because I've heard this term so much, and I initially thought it was manipulation that happened, like you're saying, like in one conversation, right?
Over time.
Okay, so like,
It can go on for long periods of time.
and it's so when you're talking about these more subtle cues, what would what are some subtle cues to even look for?
For gaslighting specifically, or
Yeah,
just
let's
any
do
kind?
that, and then let's talk.
Yeah.
Overarching.
So questioning your memory of events is a big one. That's not what happened. You know, I wasn't 30 minutes late. You know, when they were like, they're like, no, I wasn't, and you're like, yeah, I looked at the clock, and just kind of questioning little things where you're like, someone's off, and a lot of times I go, it must be me.
Okay. And then when we're talking subtle manipulation just in general, what are the beginning signs? So maybe somebody is too good to be true.
Too good to be true. Another one is the use of sarcasm in a way that's like, kind of like, oh, I was just kidding.
Like jabbing you.
Right. When you're like, ow, and they're like, oh, you're too sensitive. I was just kidding. So if you feel like you're being overly sensitive,
Whoa.
you want to take a note on that one?
Yeah, no, I know. I'm like, okay. It's so interesting because you take I feel like when it comes to dealing with these kinds of relationships, you can really easily stereotype the kind of person that gets into these. And I know I said this at the beginning, but to me, it's like, once you start questioning yourself, that's when it's such a slippery slope.
Right, because you can just continue to question. Another really common sign is wondering. Oh, we already talked about that. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Is keeping them happy. If you feel like it's your job to keep the other person happy and keep them stable, that's a warning sign. So you can help someone be happy. You can, be kind to them, but you're never responsible for someone else's happiness. And if you feel like your behavior is going to make or break their emotional state,
Yeah.
have you ever felt that?
Yeah, oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But I've also felt like, in the relationship I was in, he was so great to me. Everything was so great. And in my instance, I was dealing with a pathological liar.
Oh.
And so I didn't feel like, so when the lies started unfolding, I felt crazy because I was like, wait, the version of him that I know would never do that.
These are two separate people.
Two separate people. And so
he was that good.
Yeah, and so speaking of pathological lying, can we just talk about maybe the difference between when you're dealing with the personality disorders, somebody who is a pathological liar versus a narcissist versus a sociopath? Like, what are the differences, and like, is there a way to work with people? Because I imagine people watching and being like, okay, but I'm in a relationship and we have kids. It's not just as easy as leaving.
Right.
Like,
right.
Is there hope?
In all of those situations, well, I mean, it depends on the situation, really, and the severity, right? But the main thing is the person willing to get help? Do they recognize that there's a problem? If they don't, there's nothing you can do. You cannot rehabilitate someone who doesn't want help. You can go to a lot of people go to couples counseling, but that's not going to treat a severe personality disorder.
Yeah.
So the person that you're in the relationship with has to want to be changed. They have to want to gain that insight and to learn new skills and new ways of being in relationships.
I mean, I imagine, though, that the work that they would need to do is really, really hard. And as I've talked to therapists about this, one of the common things I've heard is somebody who has, is high functioning and has, whether it's narcissism or sociopathy, whatever it is, they'll generally seek out therapy, and then when things start to get real, they'll ditch. And they might start seeing another therapist because they're using their skill set.
Right. So people engage in therapy, and good therapists know this.
Okay.
That people will come and engage in therapy the way they engage in relationships. So often, if I sense that I'm working with someone with a personality disorder or some kind of serious, serious thing that it's gonna take a long time to deal with. I'll say, you know, the real work's gonna start when you want to quit, when you don't like me, when you start devaluing my skills. That's when the real work's going to start. So you will probably do that, and that's when. So if you can predict it as the therapist,
Yeah.
it can kind of, well, it can scare them. They're like, crap, she's too good. I'm not going to.
Yeah, they probably leave.
But sometimes they're like,
times.
oh.
Okay.
And then when it happens, you can work through that. So, but again, the motivation has to be there. And personality disordered clients, they will use the therapist, and they'll go to their new therapist and say how bad the old therapist was, and just jump around like they do with relationships.
Okay, so if you're in one of these relationships and you're looking to get out, and I imagine there's a lot of fear, I imagine at this point there is insecurity. I think like your self-worth is has probably gone down the drain.
Yeah. No one will ever love me. That's a common thing.
Totally.
Well, no, who's going to love you as much as I love you? No one. Right? You start thinking, I'm not lovable. I'm nothing without this person. Makes it really, really hard to leave.
So how do you leave?
Well, there's different degrees of danger.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about a physically violent person, that's a different thing than the emotional manipulation.
Let's talk emotional manipulation.
Okay, because we don't want to take on too much.
That feels like a totally different conversation.
We'll do that.
Yeah. You'll be back.
But so once you start realizing, wait a second, I am lovable, or frequently friends and family will say, you're not the same person you were. This is not a good relationship for you, and you'll have defended them. Over time, you'll be like, well, wait a second, maybe what they're saying is true. So lean on those people who see it from the outside.
Yeah.
You know, who can catch like, wow, he puts you down a lot, or she doesn't speak to you well. They'll start giving you feedback. Listen to that. If there are themes across a lot of relationships, listen to that and lean on those people to help you maintain the strength to leave.
Yeah.
Because it takes a lot of strength, and most of the time you don't feel strong in those moments when you're leaving someone who has manipulated you for a long time.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like a lot of times with these personality disorders, what happens is the person, their identity gets challenged by you leaving.
Oh, by you leaving.
Threatening to leave.
Yeah, and really by you having an independent sense of self in general, having thoughts that are different than theirs, having emotions, desires, and needs that are different. And so wanting to leave the relationship is like the ultimate difference, right? I want out. I don't want to be with you. That's the ultimate rejection. And so, yeah, it's often the person who's been the manipulator primarily will go into a rage, will continue the manipulation to try to draw you back in.
Yeah.
You know, texts and phone calls and stalking kind of behavior.
Yeah, interesting.
Because they're really, manipulators are very fragile people underneath it, right?
Yeah.
They need someone to constantly be feeding them and mirroring that they're okay. And so if that mirror leaves, it can be really scary for them.
Whoa, yeah, absolutely. And that takes a whole different level of strength to leave a relationship when somebody is like saying all the things that you want to hear, probably.
I'll never say that again.
Change.
Well, we can go to couples counseling. I'm so sorry.
Especially if you feel like you're dealing with two different people, like especially if you're dealing with, and that is one of the things that really helped me in my journey, was realizing that he wasn't all bad. He was the person I knew, and he was also this.
And you're in a relationship with both, and a lot of times it's not tolerable.
Yeah.
The part that's dark is too dark.
Yeah. Okay, so can we talk about healing? So
Yes.
you've left the relationship. What is the process of healing?
It's really unique to each person and each relationship, right? But one of the first steps is recognizing the thinking errors that you've bought into, right? I'm not worthy of love. I'm crazy. you know, I have a bad memory, I have poor judgment. Really start looking at that and challenging those. Another big piece is grieving the loss of relationship, because you're grieving the good part, right? It's a loss, even if it's totally unhealthy. There's still grief, and you want to just hate their guts and never think about them again, but you have to grieve. And that's really tricky for clients, because like, what is there to grieve? It was a bad relationship, but there is that good part. Everybody has light parts, you know?
I know for myself personally, if I hadn't had the support of a therapist, it would have been so much harder. What do you feel? I mean, do you feel like having that kind of support is pretty imperative to?
Oh, I do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and I do too, because I love therapy. But I also just think in general, having somebody, I don't know, I just think.
Yeah, someone who sees it objectively, who can give you feedback, who isn't invested in you leaving or staying in the relationship, but helping you sort through what you want, is really, really important.
Yeah. How important is forgiveness in the whole process of healing from something like this?
Yeah, I think to fully heal, forgiveness is probably a big piece, but forgiveness is often misunderstood.
Yeah.
Forgiveness doesn't mean going back. It doesn't mean what happened was okay. It means releasing the resentment in your heart, ceasing to feel resentment. And so it doesn't mean you ever speak to the person again. So a lot of times I think forgiveness means, oh, everything's okay, and we pretend like nothing's happened. It's really a gift to yourself to release resentment and hurt.
I always say, if you're not forgiving, it's like drinking the poison and expecting the other person to die. I
know.
say it all the time. I cannot say it enough. You know, and one of the things that really helped me was really realizing that inside of him was this hurt little boy.
Yes.
And that he had built up these tactics not to hurt me, but to protect himself.
And to try and stay connected to you. It's...
Speak more to that.
Okay, so as little kids, we develop skills to keep us in close proximity to our significant others, which is parents when you're a little kid, right?
Yeah.
So we develop these tactics of how do I keep them happy? How do I stay in connection with them? And so those develop, sometimes they're really unhealthy, but it's to protect them and to try and remain connected. So the pathological liar, he had this great side that was to try and stay connected to you.
Yeah.
Does that, like this false self? So when you realize they're really not, the intention is not to harm you unless they're sociopaths, which is, you know, pretty rare.
Yeah.
So, but they're wounded little kids that are really hungry for a relationship, but learn these really unhealthy skills of how to try and connect.
So speaking to sociopathy, because I feel like, and tell me if I'm wrong, is somebody who's a sociopath, is that like on a different level than a narcissist?
Yes.
So what are the differences? Because I found in my exploration, I got really tangled up in kind of all of the names, and like I could resonate with some of the sociopathic tendencies when I was looking into him, and I could also resonate with the lying, and I could also resonate with the narcissist. Like I could kind of pull from each.
Right.
But how do you know you are dealing with a sociopath?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you can know when you're in it, I guess, is the thing. I mean, the person would need to go to a mental health professional and get an accurate diagnosis. But a huge sign in a sociopath is the inability to have empathy at all. So it's like that's just absent. And so they can do really mean things and not have any sense of what it's doing to the other person.
How does that happen to a human being?
You know, there's multiple routes. Yeah.
I mean, is that something that starts in childhood also?
Yes.
That seems like it's like gotta develop. So then what's the difference between that and a sociopath? Or excuse me, a narcissist?
So, well, a narcissist is the person who needs that positive mirror Everything's about them. So your job in the relationship with a narcissist is to reflect well on them. So you have to, you know, kind of agree with them, keep them happy, make them feel strong, make them feel attractive. So you have to be this constant, you can't be you.
Yeah.
There's no room for you. Everything is about keeping them propped up.
Interesting. Okay. God, all of this is just so crazy because I feel, you know, after I had my experience, I realized how common this is, like I was saying at the beginning.
Yeah. Personality disorders, there are a lot of them.
Yeah, it's pretty. Am I missing? I know I kind of like touched on the lying, the narcissism, the sociopath. Are there? What am I missing?
There's borderline borderline personality disorder.
What's that?
Well, a main feature of that is this fear of abandonment. There's often like self-harm, threatening suicide. So abandonment is kind of the big trigger for people with borderline.
And are all of the ways you heal from this? Because to me, the lying in particular, it felt like an addiction. It almost felt like I was dealing with somebody who was going to go through AA when he started getting help.
It's the only way he knew how to navigate life at that point.
Are these things kind of like addictions, or like do you treat them the same way?
No, it's a different model that would be used. Yeah.
But within all of
it's all a way to cope. It's all a way, right?
Okay,
So
yeah.
what it would have in common with addiction is it's a behavior that helps you cope with reality, with your life, with emotions, with relationships.
Well, and I guess the reason why it even felt like addiction was because, like, when I look at people who do manipulate, it feels like they may have pure intentions, but once the fear crops up, then it's almost like they can't help themselves and they start doing whatever their mode of manipulation is. They just almost can't help it.
Right.
And that's kind of where I felt like it's almost like an addiction. It's like,
it's a coping skill. It's an automatic coping skill.
yeah.
Yeah, and we all develop them. We all develop, you know, healthy and unhealthy ones. And when we get scared, when we get flooded and overwhelmed or stressed out, we usually go to more primitive coping skills.
So as the partner, and I'll backtrack here and then we'll wrap up, but as the partner, if you are in a relationship like this, I'm hearing, it's the other person who's got to do the work. Like, they've got to do the work and they've got to do it on their own. I'm sure there obviously is an element of the two of you working together.
Well, and you doing your own work, because you're probably dealing with some depression, with low self-worth. So,
Totally.
Yeah.
But how do you start setting boundaries? Because it seems like at this point, the boundaries have been so kind of wiped away and in this gray area now. You don't really know what is mean and what is manipulation and what is okay and what's, when something used to definitely not be okay, it's all the same, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you start to reset boundaries to start forming a relationship that can become healthy?
Yeah. Do you have an example in mind? It might be helpful to get more kind of concrete, like, okay,
well, I imagine.
how do you say this?
I guess I don't have something in particular, but what I am thinking about is somebody who really wants to make the relationship work.
Okay.
And they may have kids, and it's just not as easy as leaving, just leaving.
Right.
And they want to figure out how to make a healthy relationship with this person because they want to keep their family together if that's what they choose to do.
So, kind of the fundamental boundary is no. That's saying, I am not you. I'm not going to play this game. I mean, 2-year-olds, that's one of the first words they learn. No. It means I'm my own person. So start saying no. Start saying, no, I'm not going to do that right now, or I don't want to. Or just reclaim that fundamental boundary.
Amazing. Is there anything else you want to leave people with today? Any kind of last words of wisdom when it comes to manipulation?
Yeah, I think it's always important to look at yourself, not as the cause of the other person's manipulation, but there's always something for us to learn in relationships. Like, how did I get here? How do I get out? But self-reflection is really, really important, and that's why therapy, you know, is important for both people.
Yeah.
But see it as, you know, you're not this weak person, but like, wow, there's something for me to learn here. I have a vulnerability, or I allowed myself to, or do you know what I mean? Something that you can work toward. And again, not taking responsibility for the manipulative behavior, because that's a manipulation tactic.
Yeah,
but to take responsibility for your own personal growth.
Yeah, well, and I think, you know, within this, it's really important also to think, like, you know, there's the whole idea of victim mentality and taking responsibility for whatever it is there is to take responsibility for. And I think weighing those and just you know, I mean, that's where the help of a therapist really comes into play.
And often we will pick people who remind us emotionally of one of our parents. Sounds like such a therapist thing to say, but it's true.
No, I get it.
And so it's important to explore that too. Like, okay, what hooked me in here?
Yeah.
And how can I be aware of that in the future so I don't repeat this pattern?
Yeah. Such a big deal. I thank you so much. There's just so much wisdom here, and I cannot thank you enough for coming on. And I feel so lucky that your practice is local in Salt Lake. So,
thank you.
all right, everybody. If you know someone who might be in or healing from a relationship that sounds familiar to what we've talked about today, please, please, please pass this on so it can support our communities. This stuff is so important, and we want to get the word out as much as possible to support as many people as possible going through anything like this. And now I've got some news. So in a few more episodes, we're going to be wrapping up The Art of Connection to bring you the next level of the show in the coming months. And I would love your feedback. What have been your favorite episodes? What topics do you want to hear more about? And what didn't I cover that you wish I had? Your input is invaluable in creating and developing the next iteration of the show. In the meantime, make sure to sign up for my email list at bayavoce.com, where I will be sending you the final episodes of The Art of Connection and weekly spirit reminders. Spirit reminders are like mini meditations and attitude adjustments, just so that you can take something throughout your day to ponder on. Thank you so, so much for watching, and I'll see you next week on The Art of Connection.